I never thought a moment could feel so wrong and right at the same time. She was standing by the window, her silhouette framed by the late afternoon light spilling over the living room. Her hair caught the glow in streaks of copper, and for a heartbeat, I forgot to breathe. She didn't turn when I entered, didn't acknowledge me yet. Her presence alone made the air thick. "You're early," she said finally, voice soft but deliberate. I could feel the weight behind it, the careful restraint in her tone, like she was measuring every word before it escaped. "I thought I'd help," I said, unsure if I meant it or if it was just an excuse to stay near her. My hands fidgeted in my pockets. I wasn't used to being nervous around anyone, much less someone like her. She had this effortless authority, the kind that made every room shrink to her size, and yet, there was a vulnerability too, tucked behind her composure, like a secret I wasn't supposed to see. She finally turned, and our eyes met. I caught a flicker there, almost imperceptible, but enough to make my chest tighten. The kind of look that said she noticed things I didn't even know I was showing. My awkward lean against the doorway, my restless fingers. "You look different than I expected," she murmured. There was a pause, and I realized she was studying me, not in judgment, but curiosity. And in that curiosity, I felt something dangerous, the pull of wanting her attention more than I had any right to. I laughed awkwardly. "Different good or different bad?" "Both, maybe," she said, and her lips twitched like she was holding back a smile. Her eyes softened, and for a second, I could have sworn she leaned closer, but then she stepped back, distancing herself like she remembered something crucial. The room smelled faintly of coffee and vanilla, comforting, domestic, like I was intruding into a world I shouldn't belong in, yet one I desperately wanted to. My gaze kept returning to her hands, graceful even as they rested loosely on the table, fingers brushing an edge absent-mindedly. There was a tension in the air I couldn't name, something electric that made my own hands tingle. "You're too young," she whispered suddenly, so quiet I almost didn't hear it. "That's why I like you." My heart slammed against my ribs, a mix of confusion and thrill washing over me. The words shouldn't have made sense, and yet they did. I wanted to argue, to laugh, to deny, but I couldn't move. I only stood there, watching her, feeling the air shrink around us. I wanted to step closer, to close that impossible distance between us, but something held me back. A caution? Or respect? Maybe both. And yet, even as I tried to convince myself to stay still, I felt the pull, magnetic and undeniable, drawing me toward her. We stood like that for a long moment, the kind of silence that hums with possibility, until a faint sound from the hallway made us both flinch. The sharp chime of the doorbell. She looked at me then, her eyes dark and unreadable. I could feel a question forming there, unsaid, dangerous, tempting. The moment teetered on the edge of everything, curiosity, desire, something forbidden. And just like that, the quiet room seemed impossibly small. I wanted to reach for her, to speak, to touch, yet the doorbell shattered the spell. Her lips parted slightly, and I saw that flash of hesitation again. She wanted to step back, or forward, I couldn't tell. And as I realized I wasn't ready to leave either, I knew everything had changed in the span of a single whispered sentence. The doorbell rang again, insistent, almost mocking. I lingered in the hallway, hearing her soft steps move toward the door. My mind raced, and I couldn't stop picturing her standing there, every detail etched into my memory, the faint crease near her eyes when she smiled, the subtle curve of her neck where a necklace might sit. She turned the lock slowly, and I realized I'd never actually asked her to let me in, never had permission to be this close. And yet, somehow, I had stepped inside her world anyway. She hesitated, eyes briefly flicking to mine, like she was weighing some invisible boundary. I remembered the first time I'd met her, not properly, but at a family gathering years ago. I was young and awkward, full of stupid jokes and blunders, and she had looked at me like I was invisible and loud at the same time. That same gaze haunted me now, but softer, more complicated. "You always think too much," she said softly, almost to herself, as if noticing my silence. I wanted to tell her that it wasn't just thinking. I couldn't stop analyzing her, the way she moved, the way she made quiet rooms feel like the world shrunk down to just her and me. But I didn't say it. Words always seemed clumsy next to what I felt, and I was scared of what speaking would do, break the fragile balance between fascination and propriety. She has a life I shouldn't intrude upon. A life complicated enough to make anyone pause. She's been married, divorced, and carries the quiet ache of decisions that never fully leave her. I see it in the way she touches a photograph on the shelf, briefly, almost regretfully, before letting her hand fall. I imagine the nights she lies awake, thinking of roads not taken, of moments that hurt her still. And me? I'm too young. Immature, inexperienced, glaring at me in the mirror every morning. I'm a friend's kid, a passerby in a life that should have nothing to do with me. But there's that spark when she looks at me, like she sees a part of herself reflected in someone half my age, and it terrifies me and excites me all at once. She shifts closer to the door, brushing her fingers against the frame as she opens it. The light falls on her face differently now, warmer, more intimate. I feel my own hand twitch, almost reaching toward her, but holding back, the tension coiling tighter in my chest. You remember the last time it rained this hard? She murmurs suddenly, voice low, as if testing whether I'm paying attention to more than her words. I blink, startled, then realize she's talking about that absurdly wet summer day years ago, when she had dragged her daughter and me into the tiny cafe downtown, laughing while we tried to keep dry under collapsing umbrellas. I can see it all again, the spilled coffee, our laughter bouncing off the walls, her hair damp and curling around her face. I let the memory settle, and something shifts between us. The space is smaller now, charged. My shoulder brushes hers, slightly, accidentally, but not quite, and the contact feels monumental. She doesn't move away. We both freeze in that moment, not speaking, letting the history, the risk, the attraction fill the silence. The world outside might be impossible, wrong even, but here, in this suspended instant, it doesn't matter. And I know, without saying it aloud, that the distance between us just got immeasurably smaller. I thought the rain outside was loud, but it didn't compare to the pounding of my own heart. She was close, too close, and every instinct screamed at me to stop, yet I couldn't. The memory of that cafe, her laugh, the brush of her fingers against mine, it clung to my skin like electricity. Maybe we should sit, she said, gesturing to the couch, but her eyes lingered on me far too long, the words hesitant, like she was testing boundaries she didn't want to cross. I nodded, my throat dry. My hand grazed hers as I moved past, and the shock of contact shot straight to my chest. She didn't pull away. She shouldn't have, and yet she stayed, letting a dangerous silence stretch between us. A knock at the door shattered everything. My stomach sank. My roommate, probably just stopping by, but that wasn't the point. She froze first, then I realized how precarious we'd been, how visible, how reckless. I'll get it, she said softly, her hand brushing mine as she moved away. My fingers lingered in the air for a fraction too long before retreating. The door opened to reveal the neighbor, innocuous, smiling, but in that moment, he was an intruder in a world that should have remained private. As the conversation dragged on, I found my gaze drifting back to her. She stood with her shoulders slightly slumped, a faint tension in her jaw, the kind I'd seen when she carried regrets too heavy for words. My pulse thudded painfully against my ribs. I wanted to reach out again, to reassure her, to be closer, but I didn't dare. When the neighbor left, the quiet returned, heavier than before. I wanted to laugh nervously, break the tension, but even my humor felt clumsy. You don't have to. She started, then stopped herself, letting the unfinished sentence hang in the air. I knew she meant to tell me to back off, to step away from what we were teetering toward, and yet she didn't. The couch seemed smaller now, the space between us charged, dangerous. My fingers twitched, wanting to reach out, wanting to trace the curve of her hand, her arm, anything to make the world shrink to just us again. I can't, I whispered, though it wasn't clear if I meant I couldn't move closer or I couldn't stay away. Her gaze dropped, then flicked back up, and I caught that flash of something I'd been chasing: hesitation, desire, and fear all tangled together. She leaned slightly, not quite forward, not quite back, and I realized we were both on the edge of something irreversible. A flash of guilt hit me. Someone could walk in at any moment. Her daughter could come home. My roommate could stumble in. And yet, every instinct in me urged forward, the magnetic pull between us refusing to be denied. I closed my eyes for a second, tasting the tension like copper on my tongue, and when I opened them, she was closer, the space between us a heartbeat, a whisper. Then, just as I was about to speak, or maybe act, the phone on the table buzzed. She glanced at it, a flicker of alarm crossing her features, and my stomach dropped. Whoever it was, whoever she might be hiding a message from, it was about to change everything. The house was quiet again, but it felt different, heavy, almost suffocating. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind against the windows seemed amplified. My pulse hammered in my ears as I watched her move, graceful and deliberate, carrying herself like she had secrets too dangerous to speak aloud. "I shouldn't," she started, her voice faltering. I could see the words trapped somewhere between fear and desire. Her fingers brushed the edge of the table, twisting a napkin like she was trying to hold herself together. I wanted to say something, anything, but my tongue felt thick. My eyes followed her, tracing the lines of her face, the way her hair fell across one shoulder, the tilt of her head that always made her seem both distant and achingly close at the same time. And then it hit me, sharp and sudden, a flash of jealousy I didn't know I could feel. Someone else could enter her life, someone who had the right to stand here, touch her, look at her the way I wanted to. My chest tightened, and I realized I couldn't stay silent anymore. I can't stop thinking about you," I blurted, the words rushing out before I could second-guess them. My stomach churned as soon as they left my lips. She froze, her hand stopping mid-motion, eyes wide, unreadable. For a moment neither of us moved. The room seemed suspended in time, charged with a tension that left me dizzy. Her lips parted slightly, as if she were about to answer, to deny, to warn me off, but she didn't. She only looked at me, steady and dangerous, like she was daring me to take the next step. Her silence was worse than words. I could feel my heart thumping against my chest, every nerve screaming that I wanted more, that I was too far gone to pull back. And yet part of me screamed to run, to flee before this impossible attraction destroyed something neither of us could undo. "I shouldn't," she whispered finally, but her eyes betrayed her. There was longing there, a quiet, dangerous invitation that made my stomach twist. I stepped closer, barely daring, and the space between us shrank to almost nothing. My shoulder brushed hers, light, tentative, but electric. She didn't move away. I wanted to close the gap completely, to let everything crash into the moment, but a voice in my head reminded me, someone could come. Someone might see. Everything was wrong, and yet nothing had ever felt more right. Her fingers twitched, hovering near mine, and I could feel the air tighten around us, full of unspoken confessions, desires, and fear. My breath caught, my heart threatening to escape my chest, and I knew we were both teetering on the edge of something irreversible. Then, a sound, a soft thud upstairs, like a door closing or footsteps retreating, made us both flinch. She glanced toward the staircase, then back at me, eyes wide, and I felt it, the fragile thread of courage that held this moment together was trembling. Her lips parted again, and I leaned slightly closer, drawn in by a gravity I couldn't resist. But before anything could happen, before we could cross that line, the sound of a phone vibrating on the table cut through the room, and her gaze snapped to it. My chest sank. Whoever it was, whatever the message contained, it wasn't just a distraction. It was a warning. The world paused. I waited, caught between the pull of desire and the weight of reality. And then she read the message. I froze as she stared at the phone, the light from the screen reflecting in her eyes like something had shifted inside her. I didn't dare move, didn't dare breathe too loudly, because whatever was there had the power to change everything. Her fingers trembled as she scrolled, and I caught the word that made my chest seize, He knows. What? I tried to ask, but my voice felt small, useless, a whisper against the thundering in my own ears. She swallowed hard, eyes darting toward the staircase, then back to me. It's your roommate, she said finally, voice tight. He saw us. Not everything, but enough. My stomach dropped. The precarious bubble we'd been floating in, the quiet, electric intimacy, was gone. Just like that, someone else had intruded into our fragile world, turning desire into danger. I wanted to argue, to convince her it didn't matter, that he wouldn't say anything, but I couldn't. Part of me knew it would matter, that it could unravel everything before it even began. Her jaw tightened. She gripped the edge of the table as though it could anchor her against a storm I couldn't see. I thought I could control it. That we could, you and I. Her voice faltered, the sentence trailing into the air. I took a step closer, desperate to bridge the gap, but she raised a hand, stopping me mid-motion. No. Not yet. We can't, he can't know. I felt a rush of guilt mixed with something else, frustration, longing, the sharp edge of fear that we were both skating on the knife's edge. I didn't think. I started, but words failed me again. I wanted to tell her that none of it mattered, that I didn't care about the risks, but the truth was I did. I cared too much. Her eyes softened for a moment, just a fraction, and I caught the glimpse of the woman I'd been drawn to from the start, the longing, the history, the quiet regret that clung to her. She stepped closer to the table, fingers brushing mine almost by accident, and it was enough to make my chest ache. I wanted to wait, she said, voice barely above a whisper. I wanted it to be only ours. But now, she shook her head, as if shaking away the weight of the world, the tension, the guilt. I reached for her hand slowly, tentatively. She didn't pull away, though the tremor in her fingers told me she wanted to. Every nerve in me screamed to close the distance, to cross that impossible line, to claim the fleeting moment before reality crashed in. And then I realized, the risk wasn't just what we felt for each other. It was the world outside these walls, full of eyes and judgment, full of consequences either of us could predict. But as I looked into her eyes, at the hesitation and the fire, the fear and the desire, I knew something too. The pull between us wasn't going to be stopped by a roommate, a phone, or a lie. Not if we both had any say in it. Her breath hitched, and I felt it, right there in the silence, the electricity of everything unsaid. Then her phone buzzed again, insistently, and this time, I saw the name flashing on the screen. And I realized, it wasn't just a warning anymore. It was a choice she had to make. The phone buzzed again, insistently, but this time I didn't care. Not the message, not the world outside, not the rules that said we shouldn't. All I could see was her. She looked up from the screen, eyes wide, haunted, and for a second, I thought she might step back, disappear into caution, into propriety. But she didn't. She stayed. I can't do this if it's going to ruin everything for you, she whispered, voice trembling. I stepped closer, closing the distance between us, reckless, heart hammering. Then don't think about everything else, I said, trying to sound steady. Think about right now. About us. Her lips parted slightly, as if to speak, to deny, to rationalize, but nothing came out. Her hand hovered near mine, and I finally took it, fingers brushing hers, tentatively at first, then holding on like I wasn't going to let go. You don't understand, she murmured, voice breaking. I shouldn't. I shook my head, cutting her off softly. I do understand. And I don't care. Not about the rules, not about the risk. I care about you. That's it. For a long moment, we just stood there, the world compressed to our tiny bubble of shared breath and silent confessions. Her eyes searched mine, like she was looking for a reason, a justification, a sign that this wasn't a mistake. I've never. She started, then stopped, the words getting lost in the tremor of her voice. I could see everything in her face, the longing, the guilt, the fear, the desire, all tangled together like a knot we both wanted to untangle but didn't know how. I tilted my head slightly, leaning in, letting the space between us shrink to almost nothing. "Then let me be the first," I whispered. Her hand pressed against my chest, just enough to keep me at bay, and I felt the pulse of her heartbeat under my fingers. It was messy. It was human. It was exactly what I wanted. "You're too young," she said again, softly, almost pleading. That's why it's dangerous. And that's why it's real," I replied, voice low, steady, refusing to let fear rule us. Her eyes glistened, and for a moment she leaned forward, almost closing the gap. I closed mine, letting the world dissolve into the space between us. Then the doorbell rang again. We both jumped, the spell breaking, but I didn't move away. She didn't either. Our hands stayed entwined, our breaths mingling, and I realized that whatever else happened, whatever storms waited outside this room, we had crossed the line in our own hearts. Her gaze lingered on mine, full of everything we hadn't said aloud yet, and I knew we understood each other now, more than we ever had before. The choice was made. Love or fear. And even with the world knocking at the door, we had chosen each other. But as the doorbell rang again, and shadows of reality crept back into the room, I couldn't tell what would happen next. We were together, for now, but the future was still waiting, unknown, and dangerously real. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the air thick and fragrant with wet earth and distant city streets. We stood in the quiet room, hands still entwined, either of us moving. Outside, the world was waiting, full of rules, expectations, and complications, but here, in this small corner, it didn't matter. She finally let out a breath, a long, shuddering exhale that seemed to carry months of hesitation, longing, and fear. "I don't know how this will work," she admitted, voice low, trembling. "But I know I want it. I want this, with you." Her words hit me like sunlight after a storm. I wanted to say something brilliant, clever, reassuring, but words felt useless compared to the truth that vibrated between us. I tightened my grip on her hand, letting my fingers press gently into hers. "That's all I need to know. That's enough." We moved closer, slowly, cautiously, like two people testing a fragile bridge over deep water. Our foreheads touched, a whisper of contact, a promise without sound. Her eyes closed, and I could feel every hesitation in her body melt away into something soft, something real. I remembered all the moments that had led us here, the laughter in the cafe during a sudden downpour, the stolen glances that lingered too long, the almost touches that set our hearts racing. Each one had been a step toward this fragile, beautiful thing that was ours. "It's messy," she murmured. "And maybe we're foolish, maybe we're reckless, maybe." I agreed, smiling despite the tension still wrapped around my chest. "But we're honest. And isn't that worth something?" Her lips curved slightly at the edges, a small, tired smile, the kind that reaches the eyes and softens the heart. We didn't need more words. Silence was enough. We understood each other fully, completely, in ways the world might never approve, but we didn't care anymore. The doorbell never rang again. The phone buzzed and flashed with messages we chose to ignore. Reality waited, but we were anchored here, in this room, in this moment, choosing each other over fear, over expectation, over caution. I rested my forehead against hers again, breathing in the faint scent of coffee and vanilla that clung to her, feeling her pulse under my palm. Everything was imperfect, dangerous, unpredictable, but somehow that made it real. That made it ours. And as we finally leaned in, just enough for the smallest brush of lips, I realized the truth. Love isn't about perfection. It's about risk. It's about showing up, even when the world insists you shouldn't. It's about holding on to someone who sees you, really sees you, and daring to hope they'll stay. We didn't know what tomorrow would bring. We didn't know how the world outside would judge us, or if it would break us. But at that moment, with our hands entwined and hearts aligned, it felt like enough. It felt like the beginning of something neither of us could have planned, but both of us had been waiting for anyway. And as the rain-washed streets sparkled in the distance, I asked myself, maybe even asked her, silently, "Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?"